Bethany Veney was born enslaved sometime between 1812 and 1815. She lived until November the 1st, 1915. She was born in Page County, Virginia. Her narrative, the narrative of Bethany Veney, a slave woman, was written in 1889. Bethany's story is truly inspirational and tells a story rarely told here in the Shenandoah Valley, which is why it is so important to share. Her story of love, of family, deep faith, amazing determination to survive, and hope to find a better life will remain with you for a long time. My name is Monica Robinson, and my roots are here in the Shenandoah Valley. We wanted to produce these videos where Bethany lived while enslaved here in rural Virginia. This is the first of 4 videos. It is the first 3 chapters of which are about her early life and experiences. We gathered together a group of readers for these videos who are related to Bethany Veney. Several are direct descendants and several others are related to her through her 2 husbands, Jerry Ficklin and Frank Veney. Our readers for the first video are Aaliyah Davis, Yania Pathfinder Pearson, a direct descendant of Bethany, and Sonia Bailey. This video is funded by a generous donation from the Virginia Humanities and from the Jerome L. Green Foundation as recommended by Karen Brooks Hopkins, whose donation is in memory of Sister Judy Brown.
I have but little recollection of my very early life. My mother and her 5 children were owned by one, James Fletcher, Pass Run, town of Luray, Page County, Virginia. Of my father, I know nothing. The first thing I remember with any distinctness was when, at about 7 years old, knocking apples from a tree, when we were surprised by my young mistress, Miss Nasness Fletcher, calling to us in a loud and threatening tone, demanding what we were doing. Without waiting for reply, she told us to follow her, and she endeavored in very solemn manner to impress us with the importance of telling the truth. If asked a question, she said, we must answer directly, yes or no. I asked her, what must we say if asked something which we did not know? She answered, why, you must say you don't know, of course. I said, I shall say, maybe 'tis and maybe 'tain't. I remember how the children laughed at this, and then Miss Nasmith went on to tell us that sometime all this world that we saw would be burned up, that the moon would be turned into blood, the stars would fall out of the sky, and everything would melt away with a great heat, and that everybody, every little child that had told a lie would be cast into a lake of fire and brimstone and would burn there forever and ever. And what was more, though, they should be burned forever and ever, they would never be burned up. I was dreadfully frightened, and as soon as I could get away, I ran to my mammy, and repeating what mistress had said, begged to know if it could be true. To my great sorrow, she confirmed it all, but added what Miss Nasmith had failed to do, namely, that those who told the truth and were good would always have everything they should want. It seemed to me then there was nothing so good as molasses and sugar. I eagerly asked, shall I have all the molasses and sugar I want if I tell the truth? Yes, she replied, if you are good. But remember, if you tell lies, you will be burned in the lake that burns forever and ever. This made a very strong impression upon me. I can never forget my mammy's manner at the time. I believed every word she said, and from that day to this, I've never doubted its truth.
Going into the family of David Kibler as I did with my mistress, I was really under his direction and subject to his control, almost as if he and not Miss Lucy had owned me. Master Kibler was a Dutchman, a man of most violent temper, ready to fight anything or anybody who resisted his authority or in any way crossed his path. His one redeeming quality was his love for horses and dogs. These must be fed before his servants, and their comfort and health always considered. He was a blacksmith by trade, and would have me hold his irons while he worked them. I was awkward one day, and he struck me with a nail rod, making me so lame my mistress noticed it and asked Matilda what was the matter with me. And when she was told, she was greatly troubled, and as I suppose, spoke to Kibler about it. For he called me to him and bade me go a long way off into a field, and as he said, cut some sprouts there. But he very soon followed me, and cutting a rod, beat me severely, and then told me to go again and tell my mistress that he had hit me with a nail rod if I wanted to. Poor Miss Lucy, she was so kind and tender-hearted. She often said she hated slavery and wanted nothing to do with it, but she could see no way out of it. It will give a clearer idea of the kind of man Kibler was and the way I grew to manage with him. If I tell here a circumstance that happened after I'd grown much older and stronger. I'd been in the field a good ways from the house, helping him to haul logs. Our work was done, and he had mounted the team to go home, and the bars were let down for him to pass out, when a drove of hogs ran in to get the clover that was growing in a part of the field. He called me to drive out the hogs. I clapped my hands together and shouted, "Shoo, shoo!" This frightened the horses, and Kibler was unable to control them. And rushing through the gateway, the team hit the side post, tearing it from its place. Of course, all this made him very angry, and of course, I was to blame for it all. As soon as he could hold the horses, he turned and shouted to me to drive out the hogs, set the post into the ground, and get back to the house by the time he did, or he would whip me so I would remember it. A big boy who had been hauling the logs with us now helped me drive out the hogs and plant the post. We hurried with all our might and then tried to run home. But by the time we got out of the woods, we saw Master so far ahead of us, I knew it was of no use to try. And I said I would risk the whipping and not run any longer. So when we came up to the house, Master was sitting in his chair by the window. And as I passed into the room near him, he handed me his jackknife and said, "Now, girl, go cut me a good hickory, a good one, mind you, for if I have to cut it myself, I'll get a hard one, you may be sure." I took the knife, passed through the kitchen to the back door, just beside which was a little shelf where the pails of water just filled with from the spring were standing. I laid the knife on the shelf and passed out the door and ran for the woods and the mountain. By the time I reached the woods, it would begin to rain and poured fearfully all that night. I crowded my head under the alder bushes while my shoulders and body were dripping wet. All night I crouched in this way, and when morning came, I was afraid to show myself, and all day kept concealed by the trees and bushes as best I could. As night came on, I was very hungry, having eaten nothing for more than 36 hours. And so I decided to go down the mountain where old Kibler, my master's father, lived, knowing that he would give me something to satisfy my hunger. As I drew nigh the house, the dogs barked, and I was afraid to encounter them, so laid out all night on the side of the hill. In the morning, it was Sunday. I ventured near the house, and the old man, seeing me, came out and gave me a howdy and asked me about the home folks, how they were doing. I told him I had not seen them since Friday and added the reason for my running away, to which he listened and then said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" I said, "Won't you, Master Kibler, go home with me and tell Master David he mustn't whip me?" I don't know how I dared to say this, for to his own slaves he was a hard, ugly man. But he gave me something to eat, then went home with me, and after repeating my story to Master David, asked him if it was true, and added, "Then you have no right to whip her." And that was the end of it. I must go back here to my mistress and her wish to not hold slaves. A gentleman from Ohio was visiting in the neighborhood, and Miss Lucy, knowing he was from a free state, asked him if he would take me north with him. He very readily consented, promising to do the best he could for me. But when Master David and others heard about it, they said it was a foolish thing to do, for this man would very likely sell me before he left the South and put the money into his own pocket, and I should find myself worse off than ever. It was true that many Northern men came South very bitter in their opposition to slavery, and after a little while, came to be of the hardest and most cruel slaveholders. I have sometimes tried to picture what my life might have been could I have been set free at that age, and I have imagined myself with a young girl's ambition, working hard and carefully saving my earnings, then getting a little home with garden where I could plant the kind of things I had known in the South, then bringing my sisters and brothers to share with me these blessings of freedom. But I had yet to know far deeper sorrows before I could have any of this glad experience. Miss Lucy now told me if I would be contented and stay quietly where I was and not be married, she would, when her nephew Noah became of age, give me my freedom. Instead of this, however, I was told soon after that she had made her will, bequeathing me already to this nephew. I was never sure this was true. Her kindness to me and my love for her made it always seem impossible.
I come now to a phase in the experience which I aroused the impressions upon me so long before in the blackberry pasture. At Powell's Fort, not far from where I now lived, was Mount Asa schoolhouse, where the different religious denominations held their meetings. My master's brother, Jerry Kibler, and his sister Sally had been to a camp meeting and got religion. They came home determined their religion would help others, and through their influence, this little schoolhouse had been fitted up with pulpit and seats, and now there was to be a series of revival meetings held there. I had never been to any kind of meeting since I was a little girl, and then my mistress had sometimes taken me along for company. At this time, Miss Ellen Mills was spinning wool at Mr. Jonathan Grandstaff's, and one night, as it was growing dusk, she came down to Master's to see if some of the family would go to the meeting with her. No one cared to go, and Miss Lucy, turning to me, said, "There's Betty. Take Betty. She will be company for you." So I went, and I have no recollection of anything he said in his sermon, but when he took his seat, he sang the hymn, "Then let this feeble body fail, or let it faint or die. My soul shall quit this mournful vow, and soar to worlds on high, shall join those distant saints, and find its long sought rest." It was a hymn of many verses. I afterwards got an old woman to teach them to me. And there was such a tenderness in his voice and such solemnity in his manner that I was greatly affected. When the singing was over, he moved about among the congregation, and coming close to me, he said, "Girl, don't you want religion? Don't you want to be happy when you die?" Then he asked me to promise him that when I got home, I would go upon my knees and ask God to give me the witness that I was his. I made him no answer, but as soon as I reached home and was alone, I knelt down and in my feeble way begged to be saved. From that day to this, I have been praying and trying to do as I thought as my Heavenly Master has required of me. And I think I have witnessed the Spirit.
Thank you for joining us for this first video of 4 of Bethany Veney's narrative. Sit back, take a break, and then we encourage you to continue viewing Aunt Betty's Story's second video about courtship, marriage, separation, and motherhood.
Oh, Jesus is my cap. Oh, I shall not be moved, just like the tree that's planted by the water. Oh, I shall not be moved. Oh, church, I shall not be moved. Oh, I shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water.